I wanted to share more about one of my clients, and she's super duper smart. She's in the corporate HR world. She is really confident in her knowledge, her expertise, and the business. But the problem was that every single time the stakes went up, she just started to doubt herself. She would basically get nervous about sharing her points in meetings. The intention of her message actually got weaker because she would just second guess, she would shrink, and she would leave the conversation sometimes sounding smaller than the level that she was operating in. And so what changed was that she wasn't the loudest person in the room. So there was nothing that changed about her personality or the volume of her voice. And she didn't become more outspoken overnight, but she was able to learn how to hold onto her value even under pressure. So she trusted that she belonged in the room and to say what she wanted to say before the moment or that conversation has passed. So in this video, I want to show you exactly what shifted for my client, because if you ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or stuck below the level that you're operating in, I want you to see that this can change for you too. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit more about my client. She's already a director, already someone who is highly capable. She was carrying a lot of weight in the business, and she still found herself being perceived actually below the level that she was operating at. And so she has a really long tenure on the team and in the organization itself. So tons of institutional knowledge and really good relationships across the business. And that means people really trusted her. And she also took on way too much than she can possibly handle. And that was the result of her having so much and such great relationships across the business. And yet, when there was an opportunity to get promoted to lead her team at a higher level, she got passed up for that promotion. And it wasn't until that time that she got feedback that she just wasn't seen as someone who was ready. And a big part of that came down to how other leaders were perceiving her. And this really frustrated my client because she was like, I'm doing all this work and I am delivering. She's burnt out delivering to the extremes that the business has asked. And she knows her work really well. So she's over delivering. And all of that is true. And however, if your leadership isn't being seen in the rooms where perceptions are shaping, in front of senior leaders, also known as the decision makers, to your promotion, the work that you're doing, as hard and tough as it is, doesn't always translate into the next opportunity. So for my client, she knew that she disconnected, especially in senior rooms. Like she knew that she wasn't herself. She shrinks. She would second guess her point. She edited herself as the words were coming out of her mouth. So she would hold back even when she knew that her thought had value. But she would tell herself in those moments, like, I'm not going to say it because whatever point I have to make is just way too obvious. And somehow the next person would say her obvious point, and then that triggered light bulbs across the room. So then she walks out of there kicking herself, just upset at herself that she didn't say what she wanted to say. But really, what she was experiencing is the tip of the iceberg, because underneath of her behavior was a really long history of other leaders not listening to her. So over time, she just learned that using her voice either wasn't met well, it didn't make her feel safe or appreciated. So in certain rooms, she just stopped sharing her voice. And the unfortunate part of all of this is that people can only see what's on the outside. So they see someone who is really smart, really capable, but just had some communication issues. They didn't see the history underneath all of it and how that history can actually train someone to protect themselves by making their presence smaller than it is. So, what made this case really important is that the issue was never about her ability. It was the gap between her actual level and her performance and what other people perceive that she could do because of how she was unable to share her voice in the moments that mattered. So that's when she came to me. We started working together, and the coaching goal wasn't to, how to make her more impressive. The goal was actually to show up at the level that she's already capable of as a starting line in a way that feels authentic and that will grow her career at the same time. And to make sure that the growth is sustainable, we don't just tackle surface frameworks. So just go into the next meeting and just use this framework. We actually started by helping her reconnect back to her own values. And also, her confidence eroded based on some history of bad leaders. So she really felt disconnected from her values. So we started there. So she needed to get clear on what she actually brought to the table and in a very evidence-based way. So she does have the knowledge, the tenure, all the relationships, and she really understands the business. So we had to anchor in on the fact with evidence that she is an asset on this team and she does have a history of growth in the organization to back up this evidence. So from there, we worked on the mindset because if someone has a history of not feeling heard, it makes sense that in certain rooms, that self-protection that she was holding on to will just activate. And she equated self-promotion as kind of like barking in the room. So she calls it cringey. She doesn't want to be the loudest person in the room. And that was never cool. But instead of self-protection, we tapped into her self-advocacy. So we tapped into her values that we defined and how she can express her values in a way that shows her strengths and her abilities in a way that isn't cringy for her. Then we paired that with speaking frameworks. And that's because the mindset alone is a great start, but it's not enough to kind of turn the engine on, especially when you're faced with a lot of pressure. So she needed a clear structure for how to enter conversations and to hold her point and position so that she is expressing her value from a standpoint of a leader. And that also means that she had to release a lot of her perfectionism. And also, we did it in a sustainable and safe way where we found spaces where she felt safe to work on how she framed her points first, how she held onto her message, and how she spoke from business relevance and strategic perspectives instead of over explaining or second guessing that she used to do. And we did it safely by identifying what settings would be just outside of her comfort zone where she could start to practice this before we started to expand the range of kind of difficulty in other rooms in which she felt like she needed to protect herself from. And that's the combination that made a difference for her because when someone understands their value more deeply and has a way and a structure to express that value under pressure, they don't collapse so quickly in the moment. And that's what happened to this client. She just became more anchored in her value, more composed in how she communicated. And she also was able to hold onto her thinking when that pressure went up. So this is the change she experienced. And if you're hearing any of this in my client story and you think, wow, like I really relate to this. I'm also someone who is operating at a higher level than what people are seeing because maybe your communication and presence just aren't matching to the full potential of your capability. This is the type of work that I actually support inside my group coaching program called the Scene Leadership Experience. It's specifically designed for quiet, high performers who are already really strong and talented in what they do. And that could be either individual contributors, people leaders, and you want to communicate with more clarity, more calmness and also with more strategic presence in the rooms that shape perception for your career growth. So if that sounds like you can learn more about the program below or to book a call with me. Okay. And I can share how this client and many of my other clients actually have felt more aligned to their authenticity while improving their ability to speak up and be seen for their full potential. Anyways, let's get back to this client. So we worked together in my coaching program. She began getting feedback that was strategic. And that was really huge for her because being strategic isn't just a compliment. It's also a way that other leaders are telling you that they don't only see you for your execution. They're really starting to see you beyond that. So they see your judgment, your perspective, your readiness, and that leadership range that you bring to the table. And my client actually felt different too. So when she started experiencing that fear that she had in those rooms, now she just doesn't feel them as often anyway. She does feel lighter. She stopped entering those rooms with the same tension and the same self-doubt as she did. And it's evident because the leaders that she's working with is actually giving her a lot more visible work, more strategic work. And she is starting to show that she can be trusted beyond that execution. She can hold her point. She can contribute with authority. And her thinking is now being heard in the meeting before that conversation has moved on. So she's thriving, and her leaders are continuing to sing her praises, and they're actually planning her next steps in her career with her leader and also what is going to be the next best career step for her after this. So if you're watching, I want you to know that you don't have to feel stuck or overlooked or underestimated. You might just need support in untangling what has taught you to hold back, because you may need better frameworks. You may need a stronger relationship with your own value. But authentic, visible growth for you is absolutely possible. If you are someone who knows you're bringing more than what people are seeing, I want this story to remind you of what you're capable of. And being overlooked doesn't actually mean that you're in the wrong room or that you don't belong. Sometimes it just means that your leadership isn't being translated in those rooms, and there is a way to translate your leadership. So if that is your painful problem, there is a workable solution. Just like my client who was already a director, really capable, really valuable, she just needed some support in understanding her value more deeply and also to communicate from a leadership position and staying true to herself and her value, even when the stakes got high. So if you're interested in this type of change and growth for yourself, I do offer a free 30-minute call to explore your specific area of growth and whether my group or one-on-one coaching is the right fit for you.